Good evening, Manpreet. Good evening, Shubhangi. Good evening, Purva. Good evening, Meshak. Veninder, very, very good evening. Let's just wait for 2 minutes. Let's let the others join as well. And then we'll start with today's module. Good evening, Pooja. Good evening, Akshay. Good evening, Golapalli, Aditya, Hemlata, Dhwani, Samiksha. Very, very good evening to all of you guys. Meanwhile, I hope the sound is okay, guys. Good evening, Sumaya, Ved Shri. Good evening, Anjali, Twinkle. All right. Thank you, Muskan. Thank you, Branjit. Thank you, Takdis. And and I hope the pen size is also okay. Hari Om. Hari Om, Hari Om. Yes, I know you're also here. Very, very good, Hari Om. Yeah. So let's wait for one more minute and then we'll start. Guys, regarding the last session that we got missed due to the technical difficulties, we will be conducting that session on Friday. Okay. So the last missed session will be this Friday. Same timing, 8:30 p.m. Yes, Steven, I'm an offline faculty. I take classes in all the batches in the offline. Sure. Last few seconds, guys. Let's wait for last few seconds and then we'll start the class. I hope this is clear, guys. The last session that we missed, we will be redoing that this Friday at 8:30 p.m. Hello, Mohammed. Hello, Kandukuri. Okay, Afreen. Hi, how are you? Economic class will be start in 1 minute, Lakshmi. Good evening, Sukanya. Sure. Let's start, guys. So, for this session, we have kept very interesting topics. Some of the topics have happened in the recent week only. For example, WTO or India and EFTA signing a trade deal. All these topics are very, very important. Let's start with each one of these topics one by one. So, we'll be doing the recently concluded WTO Ministerial Conference 13. Then we'll be doing something about the PM Har Ghar Bijli Yojana. Then something about the PLFS survey. Now this survey is very, very important and obvious, and almost all the throughout the year we get confused between various such surveys. So we will delve into that as well as we will talk about these bond indices that have been in the news recently. For example, JP Morgan that happened in September last year, then the Bloomberg, and then also one more is expected, FTSE. So these are the three important indices. Let's delve into these topics. This topic with all these topics are going to be very, very relevant for this prelims as well as next prelims. And then 1 to 2 days back only we signed this India EFTA deal. Let's discuss these topics. Voice is breaking. Guys, is my voice okay or is it breaking? All right. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Chalo. Let's start with the recently concluded WTO summit. Let's discuss each of these topics in a little more detail. Now, what has happened is recently we conducted another ministerial conference of the WTO in Abu Dhabi. Now, I hope you know that the Ministerial Conference is the highest decision making body in WTO, and it meets every 2 years, as well as multiple issues get decided in this. Now, what is the broad perspective of WTO? What are the broad principles of WTO that it works on? One of the principles is most favored nation status. What is this most favored nation status? It means that all the countries should give equal importance to all the other member countries. Then one is special and differential treatment. What is this special and differential treatment? It means that different countries should get different treatment according to their special category. For example, the developing countries should get certain more relaxations than the developed countries. Least developed countries should get even more relaxations than the developed and developing nations. All these will be touching upon in the following discussion. That is why it is important to revise this. As well as WTO wants to promote free trade in the globe. And for that, often WTO talks about reducing the subsidies across various aspects. So, in that context, let's try to discuss what are the various issues that India has with the WTO. Please use yellow color. Guys, is the white color not visible? All right. Sure. Now see, so India has many issues in WTO. India and WTO have many issues. One is something called as the broken dispute resolution mechanism. In this, what is happening? That the appellate body has not been functional. We will look into this. Then the other is dealing with the no permanent solution to the public stock holding. This comes under agreement on agriculture. Then a new discipline was added last year, which was agreement on fisheries. And even on this, India has had some concerns. And even this year, a new discipline was added. And even in this year, a new discipline was added, which is talking on services on domestic regulation. As well as a continued topic is e-commerce moratorium. Except for these 5 issues, 2 more issues are of relevance for us, which we will not discuss today, but they have been continuously in the news. But nothing special happened in MC13. What is that? One is climate change, which is now posing a problem for developing countries because the developed countries are using the climate change very, very strategically. We will get into that. So, this is another problem that India is facing. Now, see, what is this climate change problem? Let's finish off this climate change problem quickly and then we will delve into all these problems in a little more depth. Now, what is this climate change problem? The climate change problem is saying that the developed nations are saying that they need to do something to prevent climate change and they want to establish sustainable development. Now, because of that, what are they doing is they are resorting to certain protectionist measures. Now, what are these protectionist measures? For example, European Union recently came up with a carbon tax. Now, what is this carbon tax? Now, in this carbon tax, what has European Union said? That it will levy certain import duties on the imported goods which are harmful for the environment. So far, so good. But the problem lies that all these will impact India's exports of aluminium, iron and steel, etc. Why? Because these are pollutant industries. Now, through this carbon tax, what does European Union want to do? European Union wants to promote domestic manufacturing over getting the imports, which means EU wants to essentially not integrate with the world, but it wants to have a little disintegration through imposition of these tariffs, which is what is the problem of India, that India is saying that you are using non-trade issues such as climate change and you are bringing into a forum like WTO, which deals with trade. So sustainability, although it is a good objective, but it does not have anything to do with trade, as well as issues like gender parity. Gender parity is a very, very noble objective, but it has got nothing to do with the international trade. But still, all these issues, voice is lagging. But still, all these issues have been plaguing the talks. So that is about the climate change. Let us delve a little deeper into the 5 important points that have been discussed in this Ministerial Conference 13. I hope things are clear till here, guys. We'll move forward. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Developed countries are taking, yes, Femina, exactly. That is what is the issue. Carbon tax point not clear. Carbon tax. Lakshmi, EU has put some carbon tax on the imported products on industries such as aluminium, iron, steel. Now, why has it done that? It will increase the cost of import. So, for example, if India exports to the EU, now our exports will cost 20 to 30% more. Therefore, the people in EU will prefer to buy locally, who will be 20 to 30% cheaper. So, if you want to sell iron and steel to European Union countries, you need to set up the companies in European Union, so that the import duty will not be applicable on you. So let's take up the first point, which is the dispute resolution mechanism. The broken dispute resolution mechanism. Now let's try to understand, how does this dispute resolution mechanism work? How does this dispute resolution mechanism work? Now, see, how does the WTO even work? So, at the topmost decision-making body is the Ministerial Conference. After that comes the dispute settlement body. In General Council, there are 3 bodies, but we will be concerning ourselves with the dispute settlement body. Now, in this, what happens is, let's say a member has a problem. Let's say India has some problem with US imposing certain restrictions. So, for example, US recently came up with Chips and Science Act 2022. Recently it came up with Chips and Science Act, under which US is restricting the exports of chips and other such semiconductors. So if India has a problem with this step of US, what can India do? India can approach the WTO and ask for a panel to be formed. India can approach the WTO and ask for a panel to be formed. Now, this panel will give some judgment. So, for example, even in 2018, India had imposed certain duties on the semiconductors or the other type of imports that China was dumping in India. So, we had imposed that. China took us to WTO, China and other countries took us to WTO, and in 2021, ruling came against us. The panel ruled against India. Now, what can India do? Now, what can India do? Now, what can India do? Now, India can go to the appellate body. Usually, if the appellate body was functional, we would have gone to directly the appellate body to appeal. What do we mean by appellate body? The body where you appeal. In Supreme Court also, you would have heard about appellate jurisdiction. Appeal. So, the panel's judgment will be appealed by India or US, whichever country is the aggrieved one, and then the appellate body will take the final decision. Now, what is the problem in this? That recently the panel is functional, but the appellate body is not functional. And why is that? That appellate body is not functional. Why is the appellate body not functional? Now, see, it does not have the quorum. It does not have the quorum. It does not have the quorum. So, for the appellate body to function, you need minimum 3 members. But since 2019, US has been opposing the appointment of the various members into the dispute settlement appellate body. And why is that? Because few of the decisions went against the US, and now US thinks that WTO does not work for the interest of US, which is why US is blocking the appointments. One question to you guys: how can one country block appointment of this? And can India also do the same? How can one country block appointment of members into the dispute settlement appellate body? And can India also do this? Veto power. No, guys, not veto power. No, it is not the hegemon, guys. Not that reason. Yes, Dheeraj. Very, very good, Dheeraj. Yes, India can also, by the way. Very good, Kirtana. Very good. The value of vote is different. No, Kushi. Now, see. Very, very good, guys. No, 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 no. No, Chitri. Permanent member of UNSC. That is not the reason. Quite a few of you have given the right answer. Yes, Shivani. Very, very good. Now, see. No, not revenue deficit, Sunita. Now, see. Let's try to understand. WTO decision making works via consensus. WTO decision making works via consensus. Now, what is this consensus? Consensus means that unless all the members agree, no decision can be taken. Unless all the members of WTO agree, no decision can be taken, which means even if one member does not agree with any of the decisions, any decision cannot be taken. So, even India can do that, US can do that, China can do that, Pakistan can also do that. Now, let's move forward. I hope the things are clear till here, guys. How is the appellate body being stopped by the US? Because there is no quorum. Because there is no quorum. That is, no minimum number of appointees. That is why the appellate body is currently defunct. I hope this point is clear, guys. Done. So how is consensus different from veto? Consensus means everybody needs to agree. Even if one single person says no, no means no. Veto power is given to only certain individuals. So veto power can be given to only certain individuals. So UNSC is a member of 193 members, but veto power has been given to only 5 members. But assume that in WTO, everybody has a veto power. Assume that consensus means everybody has a veto power. UNSC veto power, only 5 members have veto power. Chalo, I hope this is clear, guys. So this has been the problem since 2019. So it has been a recently persistent issue that India has been raising in WTO forums. And this can be a direct mains question also, by the way. This can be a direct mains question also, that what are the various issues that India is facing in WTO. Specific issue to agreement on agriculture has already been asked last year. So even this can be a probable question. Let's move forward, guys. The next problem is the problem of public stock holding pattern. No permanent solution of public stock holding problem. No permanent solution of public stock holding problem. I had formatted the PPT. I think some of this is going away. Let's try to understand what is happening. Now see, although we will discuss this agreement on agriculture in detail in the coming Friday class, but now try to understand agreement on agriculture talks about 3 things: market access, export subsidies, and domestic support. Domestic support means how much support can the each country give to the domestic farmers. Now this domestic support has 3 types of subsidies. One is meant in a box that is called as the green box, other is called as the blue box, other is called as the amber box. Now try to understand that WTO does allow the member countries to undertake public stock holding for food security purposes. What did I say? That WTO allows public stock holding for food security. But then what is the issue? Because everywhere we have heard that the problem that India raises is that WTO is not allowing public stock holding for food security purposes. In fact, such kind of expenditure is considered as green box subsidy, which means the government is not limited in its expenditure to spend under this public stock holding, which means there is no limit. And that is why the question comes that then what is the problem in this? Then the problem comes, what is the problem? Now let's try to understand that what is the problem in this public stock holding for food security purposes. Now when we talk about public stock holding for food security purposes, see, green box allows public stock holding for food security purposes where the procurement is done at market prices. But India and the developing countries do the procurement at administered prices. WTO allows public procurement for food security purposes, but at market prices. Whatever is the market price, you can procure as much as you want, but at market price. But India and the other countries follow procurement at administered price. And what is the administered price in India? We call that MSP. We call that as MSP. Got it clear, guys? And that is the problem why India is having problem with this clause. Now for this clause in 2013, at the Bali summit, there was inserted a peace clause. There was a peace clause that was inserted under which such practices will be allowed for the developing countries unless there is some permanent solution. Unless there is some permanent solution. Got it till here, guys? I hope this point is clear as well. Yes, MSP is minimum support price, Lakshmi. Green box means there is no limit on the government expenditure. Public stock holding, for example, PDS system, Himanshu. Grey box is in your mind. Grey area de hai na? Grey box जैसा कुछ नहीं है. There are only three colors of boxes: amber box, blue box, and the green box. Good evening, Rupesh. I hope these things are clear, guys. Peace clause. Peace clause is for inner peace. See, peace clause. What does peace clause mean? Peace clause means that the developing countries have to limit their expenditure under these administered prices. Why? Because they come under amber box subsidies, 10% AMS limit. But the developing countries have been exceeding that expenditure, which is why always developed countries point out to this increase in expenditure by the developing countries, to restrict which India came up with that we need to settle this, and unless this is settled, let's have a peace clause unless we come up with a permanent solution. And since 2013 to today, we do not have a permanent solution. I hope this is clear, guys. At the same time, guys, we will do this topic in a little more detail when we talk about agreement on agriculture in the next class. Chalo, let's move on to the next topic. The next is something called as the fisheries agreement. My whole formatting got disturbed. Anyway, now what is this agreement on fisheries? What is this agreement on fisheries? Now, for a very long time, WTO had been discussing this agreement on fisheries. Now, what is this agreement on fisheries? This agreement on fisheries, what does this mean? That all the countries give certain subsidies to their companies and to their farmers. Why? To promote fishing. So, for example, China has been giving heavy subsidies to its companies to go fish in distant waters. Even the Scandinavian countries, the developed countries, all of them have been giving heavy subsidies to their companies. However, what the developed countries have been saying that in the recent past, what has been observed in the recent past, what has been observed is that due to increased and illegal fishing, the fish catch has been reducing. Now, since fish catch has been reducing, it is having environmental impacts all over the world. If fish catch at one place is reducing, it will have impact on multiple places in the world, which is why they have been arguing for a fisheries agreement. And under this fisheries agreement, what do they want to do? They want to ban all illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Illegal. For example, China doing some fishing in exclusive economic zones of some other country. Unreported. So all the countries have to report wherever they are fishing to the WTO. But countries like China, they never report it to the fullest. Then unregulated, which means they are not even under certain regulations. At the same time, so these type of subsidies that the government has been given has to be stopped. At the same time, it also restricts subsidies for fishing on the high seas. Now, what are these high seas? High seas is what is called as distant fishing. And what is this distant fishing? This is beyond 200 nautical miles of your maritime boundary. Now, what is this 200 nautical miles, guys? What is this 200 nautical miles? What is the area? What is the zone that is called till 200 nautical miles? Correct, Ravi, Femina, Shrishti. Very, very good. EEZ, exclusive economic zones. Okay. So, any fishing that you do beyond your exclusive economic zones is called as distant fishing. Usually, that is called as distant fishing. So, these two types of subsidies have been banned under this agreement on fisheries. Yes, very, very good. Soumya, Harshita, Afrin, Shubhangi. Economic jurisdiction. This is the word, the technical word that we're looking for is exclusive economic zones. Now, see. Now, as a part of this, now this proposal was opposed by countries like India. Why? This proposal was opposed by countries like India. Why? Because countries like India, in India, we are having so much problem in the fisheries sector. And what is that problem? See, in India, the fishery sector is not only a source of exports and production. Fisheries sector in India is a source of livelihood for many individuals, many fishermen. Unlike the other countries where it is mechanized and where it talks about the companies, fishery sector in India talks about individuals. And we give a lot of subsidies to help these individuals. And these individuals do end up doing sometimes illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. For example, a very common example is our fishermen being caught in the Sri Lankan waters near Kachativu Island. Kachativu Island. Two questions to you guys. Do write it in the comment box. Who gave Kachativu Island to Sri Lanka, as well as what is the strait name where this Kachativu Island nearby is found? Very good. Nahi Jaswant, not Nehruji. Very, very good. Indira Gandhi. And what is the strait name, guys? Park Strait. Very, very good, guys. Very, very good. Attentive people. Very, very good. Now see. So what India is saying that India, countries like India, they cannot afford to simply give up these subsidies. Why? Because they need these subsidies in order, to sustain the livelihood of around 1.5 to 2 crore fishermen that are dependent on this sector. And that is why if you want us to give up this, you need to give us technology. You need to transfer a certain technology. Okay, you need to transfer a certain technology so that our fishery sector can also modernize and we can also undertake certain modernized fishing so that we are not dependent on the trawlers and that kind of fishing. And that is what we call as, this entails new funding for voluntary contribution under which there would be certain technology transfers. And then a very important point is, for this agreement to become operational, 2/3 of WTO members need to accept the protocol, which means this is only signed in MC12 2022, but till now it is not operational. Agreement on fisheries is not operational. Okay, please remember this point. Agreement on fisheries is not operational unless 2/3 of the members will sign to the protocol. Every agreement has to have a protocol, and this is what India has blocked. This is what India has blocked due to certain commitment issues. Relationship wale nahi. Other commitment issues. Now, what are the commitment that is expected? Now, under this commitment, the first, is there any agreement between? Sure. No, currently there is no agreement, guys. There is only a different. There is only some unsaid discussions. There are ad hoc arrangements between India and Sri Lanka. Now see. Now in this, what is happening is under this fishery subsidies, the countries need to eliminate the subsidies in 2 years. India is saying that we cannot eliminate these subsidies in 2 years, and we have already seen what happened in your agreement on agriculture. We are not going to do the same mistake twice. We want to extend it till 25 years. At the same time, one protocol also says that developed countries will not give any such subsidies for the next 7 years. India wants even this to be extended to 25 years. And on these basis, India has been blocking the signing of this agreement on fisheries protocol. Any agreement to get operationalized has to have a protocol. For example, any law in India to get operationalized has to be notified by the government. For example, CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. It was passed in 2020, but it was not operationalized yet, and it has been operationalized recently. I hope this point is clear, guys. Thank you, Vedshri. So this is about agreement on fisheries. Next, recently a new discipline has been added. And what is that new discipline? This is SDR, Services Domestic Regulation. This is Services Domestic Regulation. Now, what is this Services Domestic Regulation? This Services Domestic Regulation, what do they mean? Is, now see, what are these services? Now, services forms a very, very important part of world GDP. All over the world, around 60% of production happens in services. We talk about production of goods and services. Of all the production that happens in the world, goods are 40% and services are 60%. So 60% is the total production of services, which means if the total production of the world is $100, $40 is goods and $60 is services. But of this, of the total international trade, hardly 20% is services and 80% is goods, which means if we are trading $40, if all over the world we are trading $40 with each other, of that $40, $32 are of goods. $32 are of goods and only $8. We are producing $60 services, but we are trading hardly $8 of services. We are producing $40 of goods and we are trading $32 of goods. So trade in goods is very, very high compared to trade in services. And to boost this trade in services, we came up with General Agreement on Trade in Services. That is the need for General Agreement of Trade in Services. Now see, now what are the different types of services? What are the different types of services? There are 3 types of services that are there in GATS. Mode 1, Mode 2, Mode 3 and Mode 4. Now what is Mode 1? Cross-border services. In this, you need not be present physically in the other border. For example, IBM outsourcing call centers to India. So that is a type of Mode 1 services. Now what is Mode 2 services? Consumption abroad. For example, you going and visiting the Leaning Tower of Pisa or the Statue of Liberty, and Americans coming and visiting Statue of Unity or even Taj Mahal. So that is what is called as Mode 2 type of services. Mode 3 is commercial presence. TCS being present in US, Amazon being present in India. This is what is the mode 3 type of services, and mode 4 is movement of natural person. So Priyanka Chopra going to US or Nora Fatehi coming to India. You going to under TCS to US, that is the on-site placements. So all of that is in mode 4. Now, amongst all this, whenever the discussion happens on trade in services, India wants more flexibility in mode 4, but others want more flexibility in mode 1, 2, and 3. Others want more flexibility in mode 1, 2, and 3. And this is often a bone of contention under general agreement on trade in services. I hope it is clear till here, guys. If it is clear, we will move forward. Mode 1 is cross-border services. For example, if IBM has a call center in India for customer support, Lopita. Clear? Sure. Let's move forward. Now, what is this new services domestic regulation? This is a new discipline that has been added. This is a new discipline. New discipline means under the GATS, a new thing has been added. Now, what does this new discipline talk about? This new discipline talks about that the various restrictions that are currently put on the cross-border services. For example, our people cannot go and work easily. The H-1B visa issue that is often with the US. Our people cannot go and work easily with US or Amazon and other such entities working in India, operating in India, but having certain issues. All those issues have now to be sorted because all of them suffer from heavy red tapeism. So if you have to provide any services across the borders, you have to undergo through heavy red tapeism, and that is what this SDR talks about, that all these red tapeism has to go. But the problem that India is facing, that the countries are talking about red tapeism that is faced for these, but no red tapeism concern is being addressed for mode 4. Red tapeism means regulatory control, guys. Having many laws and regulations. Too much formalities. Yes, Navdeep. Sure. But the point is that SDR has been concluded under WTO and it has been added into the schedule of GATS. Now, what is this schedule? Schedule is an explanation to any article or any agreement. It is a list of things. So, under this, new schedules have been updated. And this is what is the SDR. Now, under this, obviously, you do need to know that it is the first ever commitment in WTO ensuring non-discrimination between men and women when they seek permits to supply services. At the same time, the more important point that we need to focus is India's win on multilateralism. Now, what is this India's win on multilateralism? Now, try to understand that there is, how do I insert? Now, try to understand that there is something called as joint statement initiative. Now, what is this joint statement initiative in WTO? Now, under this joint statement initiative, what can happen is few countries can come together and they can start talking about any particular subject. For example, for e-commerce, few countries can come together. There can be a joint statement initiative on e-commerce. There was a joint statement initiative on services, domestic regulation as well. Now, the problem with this is that this talks about plurilateralism, which means few members are discussing amongst themselves about what should they do about such issues, but WTO is about multilateralism. They talk about plurilateralism, but WTO talks about multilateralism. Now, what is the difference between plurilateralism and multilateralism? What is the difference between plurilateralism and multilateralism? Plurilateralism means few countries coming together discussing amongst themselves. Multilateralism means that all the countries will discuss a concept together. And this is where the question comes of consensus. Under plurilateralism, few countries are there. Under multilateralism, all members are included. Tell me, guys, is joint statement initiative against the principles of WTO, or are they in consonance with the principles of WTO? Against. Very good. Against. Which I will, that can increase the problem, but that is what we want currently, Vechri. Now see, very good, guys. Now see, joint statement initiative. Now WTO does not prohibit its members to come together and discuss few topics related to trade and try to make the trade freer. Otherwise, why do we have free trade agreements? What is a free trade agreement? If India and ASEAN have entered into a free trade agreement, what does this mean? India and ASEAN are giving some benefits to each other, which they are not giving to other countries, hence violating the most favored nation status. Got it clear? But this is allowed. Why? Because most favored nation status talks about a minimum level of free trade. But these free trade agreements talk about freer trade. MFN talks about, WTO is about ensuring a minimum level of free trade. These joint statement initiatives talk about freer trade. That is why they are very much in consonance with the principles of WTO. I hope it is clear till here, guys. I hope it is clear till here, guys. Difference between mode 1 mode 2. SMA will reply to you, Saurabh, don't worry. I hope the joint statement initiative is clear, guys. FTA is nothing but free trade agreement in which two countries decide to decrease the trade barriers amongst themselves. FTA is freer trade, most favored nation status is free trade. Most favored nation status, this talks about free trade, whereas FTAs talk about freer trade. Chalo. So, what was the problem that India faced in this joint statement initiative? Now, this was taken by some countries which wanted to lower the trade barriers. How do we go to the first? Which wanted to lower the trade barriers in mode 1, mode 2, and mode 3 services, as well as they were taking the route of plurilateralism. But what does India support? Multilateralism. Eventually, all these things were, oh, nice, this came back. Eventually, all these things were taken under the multilateral fold. All these things were taken under the multilateral fold, and that is how new discipline got added in WTO. It is not a mutual agreement, it is a all multilateral agreement. Yes, WTO promotes bilateral agreement because again, bilateral agreements talk about freer trade. WTO talks about a minimum level of free trade. So plurilateralism means few countries coming together. Multilateralism means all the countries coming together. Joint statement initiative, few countries. Now it has been accepted by all the countries. So few countries are not dictating the whole process. So this is the next thing that has been done. Next is a very, very important topic, and that deals with something called as e-commerce moratorium. I hope you understand what is moratorium. Moratorium means something has been restricted by themselves. ये तोहफा हमने खुद को दिया है. Moratorium means that something has been restricted, and who has put that restriction? It is not external. We have decided that we would not do it. In that context, let's try to understand what is this e-commerce moratorium. Now see, in 1998, during the second ministerial conference, this e-commerce moratorium was there. And what is this e-commerce moratorium? Under this moratorium, member countries agreed that they will not impose customs duties. Member countries agreed that they will not impose customs duty on e-commerce goods, that is digital goods. That is digital goods. Tell me, what is the difference between digital goods and digital services? How do you differentiate between digital goods and digital services? Tell me, guys, how do you differentiate between digital goods and digital services? No, it is not physical. Nope. So, let's try to understand. Laptop and TV, all of that is physical. You are getting that physically. That is not a digital good. Now see, digital good is if you are selling something. If you are selling something, and digital services is when you are providing something. Now, what is the difference between selling and providing? So, for example, if we take example of your Facebook. In your Facebook, the data relating to your photos or your whereabouts, your location, if that is sold to someone else for marketing purposes, then that data acts as a digital good. But if you are simply posting your photos, sharing your photos, or sharing your opinions, that Facebook is providing digital services. So Facebook can provide both digital goods as well as digital services. What are digital goods? Providing something is called as digital services. Selling something is called as digital goods. So for example, if you buy a software, that is you are buying. But if you take certain services, Instagram, if you are uploading some reel, that is services. Advertisement, services. Digital goods is when your data is being sold to someone else. That is digital goods. Education app is a services. Now see, so it is in that context that all these digital goods were said that no trade restriction will be imposed and no customs duty will be levied. And now see, what happened is, since 1998 till 2024, it has been around 26 years, and in these 26 years, every 2 years, it gets extended. And the same has happened in Ministerial Conference 13 this year. And in that context, we need to understand that what are India's issues with this e-commerce moratorium. Now let's try to understand what is this e-commerce moratorium. This is against Article 21. Kuch bhi. Now see, India's issues. What issues does India have with this? Buying bond demat. Yes, that is a digital good. Now see, Vichy, that is a digital good. Now see, what is this? What are the issues that India faces with respect to this e-commerce moratorium? Now, this e-commerce moratorium, first and foremost, we have custom duty revenue losses. It is believed that the developing countries are losing around $10 billion every year due to these e-commerce operators, because we are not able to charge them. Why? Because we have a restriction to not impose customs duty. At the same time, data localization is also becoming a problem. Why? We want these e-commerce industries to We want these e-commerce industries to localize our data in India. They need to store our data in India, but they say that this is restricting trade. This is restricting trade. Who says that? Developed countries say that data localization policy restricting trade, because then it will entail additional cost on such players like Amazon, Microsoft. All of them will have to save their data in India. Facebook, all of them will have to save their data in India. So data localization, that is what is data localization, that local data has to be stored locally, because right now where does the data of Amazon gets stored? In US servers. So India is basically asking that you should bring back our data from US servers and store that data in Indian servers. Then the moratorium also says that countries, since developing countries are losing $10 billion every year, India, South Africa, all these are losing $10 billion every year. And why is that? Because during this time, 1998 to 2004, smartphones have increased. Nobody could have predicted in 1998 that by 2024, e-commerce would become such a big problem, such a big sector, such a big sector. It would become such a big sector. But nonetheless, it has become that sector. So we cannot impose customs duty. That is, if some cross-border trade is happening, we cannot put customs duty. But if we want, we can have internal taxes. But those internal taxes cannot be discriminatory to the foreign player, which means we cannot impose a tax which is only on Amazon but not on Nykaa. We cannot impose any internal tax which is only on Amazon but not on Nykaa. So that is what is the internal tax. And the last is disclosing source code. So what does the government of India want? Government of India wants that all these companies, Facebook, Amazon, they should share their coding as to what is their algorithm. What is the reason that they're promoting a particular type of content? If Twitter is promoting some content, why is it promoting that content? What is the logic? At the same time, if Facebook or Instagram is promoting some content, what is the code that is enabling promotion of that content? If Amazon is promoting some product, what is the code? Is it all fair, or there are certain hindrances? And that is what we say, that India wants these companies to disclose their source code, but then these companies say, my source code is my bread and butter. If I tell you how the code will work, that can be misused by other companies. And that is what is the issue in this one. Got it till here, guys? I hope this issue is clear. Dikshit, internal tax, once more. Internal tax means we can open internet 3. Internal tax means that we can have certain taxes. GST is an internal tax. GST is an internal tax. Dikshit, I hope this is clear, guys. Source code, yes, it can be protected, but it has to be disclosed to the government. Custom duty again. I think you guys will make me repeat the entire lecture again. We will move forward. We will look at all these topics later. Okay, we will look at all these issues later. Let me complete the topic first. So this is what is e-commerce moratorium. In either case, SME will reply to your doubts, guys. Meanwhile, next. So these were all the issues that India faced in WTO. Now let us look at few of the questions. मेरे को पता है आंसर देख लिया होगा, रुक जाओ. Now see, let's try to look at few questions. With reference to the e-commerce moratorium in WTO, consider the following statements. Countries would not be foreclosed from enacting internal taxes on electronic transmissions. Here, the only problem you will face in understanding what is this meaning of foreclosed. Now, this essentially means that countries can have internal taxes. and which is allowed in this moratorium. Which is allowed in this moratorium. Just the fact that it should not be discriminatory. It should not be discriminatory. So both these statements are correct. So the answer is we have to tell what is not correct. Since both are correct, that is why D is the correct answer. Internal tax, GST is an internal tax. GST is an internal tax. Okay. Or even the VAT, all these are internal taxes. Conduct a poll. Yes, Afrin, I understand there is some technicalities. I will learn it by the next class. I don't know that technicality. I will learn it by the next class, guys. As of now, yahi pe likh do. Now, let's look at another question. Ye mera answer. Chalo. Now see, let's look at another question. Agreement on fisheries that was signed in the 12th ministerial conference. By the way, e-commerce moratorium has again been extended by 2 years. So now it will be again taken up in 2026. Got it clear? And why did we accept e-commerce moratorium? Why did we accept e-commerce moratorium? And why did we not press our weight against it? Because we are currently pressing our weight against fisheries sector. So it is always a give and take. I will not let fisheries sector go. ठीक है, e-commerce I can roll down the ball to the next 2 years, but fisheries I will not let go. Fisheries I will put my weight. I am not signing fisheries protocol. I hope that is clear, guys. Chalo. Now let's talk about this question. With reference to agreement on fisheries signed in 12th ministerial conference of WTO, consider the following statements. It is already in force. This is a wrong statement. Why? Because 2/3 members are needed to vote on the protocol. So this is a wrong statement. Then the developing countries have been given 7 years to phase out. Yes, developing countries have been given, but the final protocol has not been signed. And this is what is the debatable issue, that India wants it to be extended to 25 years. India wants it to be extended to 25 years, which is why we do not have a final protocol yet. So the answer is not correct. Answer is C for Chennai. Afreen, थोड़ा देख के देखो, इसमें not correct बोला है. Now let's move on to the next question. This is a mains question for you guys. Do try to write this answer. We've already discussed this in detail. Let's move on to the next topic. Cabinet okay 75,000 crore free electricity scheme. Now, what is this free electricity scheme? Now see, on 22nd January, when the Ram Mandir was being inaugurated, the Prime Minister came up with a new scheme which was to provide 300 units of electricity, to every month to 1 crore households. Now this entails certain questions that can be asked. Now what is the name of this scheme? PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. And this is going to be in news for some or the other reasons. Now what are we trying to do in this? We are essentially promoting solar rooftop installations. Solar rooftop installations. Now, why are we promoting solar rooftop installations in the first place? Now, why are we promoting the solar rooftop installation in the first place? See, first of all, try to understand that we have certain commitments under the Paris Climate Deal, which is why we have to promote renewable energy to meet the targets. But the problem is, even though we are producing more solar energy industrially, but rooftop segment is a segment that is lacking currently. And obviously, reducing emissions, all those jargons you already know. In that context, let's try to understand what is this scheme about. Now see, currently the rooftop installations account for a very, very low percentage of total installations, which is why rooftop installation is an area where we can capitalize and where we can expand our reach. And having more rooftop installations will not only be relevant for our renewable energy commitments, but it will have even more spillover effects. How? Having, what did I say? Having rooftop installations will have spillover effects across other sectors. How? First of all, it will also have boost to made in India products. Because under this scheme, which type of products will be favored? Made in India. At the same time, decentralized power. This is what is called as decentralized power. The benefits of this scheme is something that we can be asked in prelims, and that is a separate topic we need to discuss. Just wait for 2 to 3 minutes. We will come on that topic. What are the benefits of this scheme? But currently, let us have an overview of how does this scheme work. First, let us try to understand how does this scheme work, and then we will see what are the benefits of this scheme. Now, under this, again, to promote the villages, we will have a model village. First, we will develop a model village. We will let the other people know how will this work, and then that model village will obviously act as a source of inspiration for other villages that is to be followed. Anushka, I am not able to see anything. Guys, are the slides visible? Is the connection proper? Is the connection proper, guys? Visible. All right, all right, all right. All right, guys. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Chalo. And the urban and local bodies will also be included in this. Now, one question can be asked whether it is a central sector scheme or is it a centrally sponsored scheme? Now, what is the difference between central sector scheme and centrally sponsored scheme, guys? Tell me, what is the difference between a central sector scheme and a centrally sponsored scheme? Very, very good. So a common mistake that you guys do is that a central sector scheme is which is 100% funded by the center, and a centrally sponsored scheme is one where the funding is shared between center and the states, which is a wrong notion, because otherwise how do we have 100% centrally sponsored scheme? We also have 100% centrally sponsored scheme. For example, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. It is not the funding that decides whether a scheme is a central scheme or a centrally sponsored scheme. It is not the funding that decides. It is the subject of the scheme that decides. So for example, centrally sponsored schemes are made on state list or concurrent list. Central sector schemes are made on central list or union list, which is why Manrega is made on the subject labor, which is a concurrent subject, that is a centrally sponsored scheme. At the same time, modernization of police force, police is a state subject, that is why it is a centrally sponsored schemes. Got it clear, guys? So it is not the funding that decides, it is the subject that decides. So for example, if any scheme is being made on defense, that will be a central sector scheme. If any scheme is being made on only insurance, it will be central sector scheme. Why? Because insurance is a central subject. I hope this is clear, guys, and it is your homework to tell me where does this scheme fall. Is it a central sector scheme or a centrally sponsored scheme? I'll tell you the answer in the next class. Even the government has not disclosed, by the way, which type of scheme is it. Try to Google. We will discuss this in the next class. Now, let's try to understand how is this free? Because the government is saying, free word kahan gaya? Because the government is saying that It is a free electricity scheme. How is it free electricity scheme? So let's try to understand how does the funding work in this. How does the funding work in this? Now see, the solar rooftop installations can be of either 2 kilowatt or 3 kilowatt. For installations up to 2 kilowatt, 60% subsidy will be given by, 60% of the cost will be given by center. 40% will be given for 2 to 3 kilowatt. But if you are getting installed beyond 3 kilowatt, there will be no eligible subsidy, which means the first statement that can be asked in prelims is, this is available for any type of solar rooftop installation. Is that a right statement or a wrong statement? Wrong statement. Why? Because this scheme is freely available only till installation up to 3 kilowatt. Got it clear, guys? Very, very good, Ilma. Power is in a state list. Very, very good. That is what. Now see. Yes, it is a centrally sponsored scheme. Very good. Tez bacche hain. Very, very good. Let's move forward. Now, government is giving only 60% of the funding. 60% or 40%. बाकी का पैसा कहां से आएगा? Where will the remaining money come from? It will come from loans. And that is where the question comes. If we have to take loan, how is it free? I hope you got the point of inquiry. What is the point of inquiry? If we have to take loan, if government is not giving 100% of the cost, how is this free? How is this scheme free? Let's try to understand this. Very good evening, Vedant. Now, how is it a free electricity scheme when the center is paying only some part of it cost? Now, funded component is up till 40% and 60% for 2 to 3 kilowatt and up to 2 kilowatt. 60% cost is being given by the center. Now let's try to understand how will the unfunded component work. Now this unfunded component, some PSU will take the loan. You will not take the loan. Some PSU will take the loan, which means banking sector gets involved. And that PSU, although the payment of the interest has to be paid by you, and how will you pay that interest? Now you will generate solar energy throughout the day. It may so happen that you are generating more than 300 units. Whatever you generate more than 300 units, you will sell it back to the power distribution companies and you will receive some money. With that money, you will pay principal and the interest of the loans. And that is how it is free, because you will be entitled to get payments in excess of the 300 units that you produce. I hope this is clear. Yes, we will sell it to the grid. Ritesh, PSU, public sector undertaking. And that is how this is being done. Now see, a common criticism can be, when you have to give it for free only, why not giving it for completely for free? Paisa directly transfer kar do. Why are you not transferring the money directly into the bank accounts? Because that will not lead to money multiplier effect in the economy. That is why this mumbo jumbo is done, so that various institutions get involved and there is a money multiplier effect in the economy and there is a self accountability. Because if they simply transfer the money, how will the government ensure that it isn't working? How will the government ensure that you are staying connected to the grid? How will the government ensure that the grid is reaching your houses? That is why this mumbo jumbo is done. Okay, that is why all this mumbo jumbo is done. So I hope this is clear, guys. PSU, public sector undertaking. Yes, PSU will take a loan for the houses. I hope this is clear, guys. Off budget borrowing, बिल्कुल हो सकता है. चल. Now let's try to understand how will this result in saving the costs of the government. And this is the point that we were talking about. What are the benefits of this? Now see, first thing that it will lead to is decentralized energy generation. Now see, decentralized energy generation is very, very important so that the grid has lesser load. Right now, even during the winters or especially during the summers, the grid load is very, very important. AC chal rahe hain, there are ACs and other electrical appliances. So if we are producing our power, Atmanirbhar, if we have become Atmanirbhar at our home, lesser power needed from the grid. In fact, instead of taking power from the grid, we are giving power, because by giving that power, we will get the excess extra money from which we will pay our interest and payments. So two things it does. First of all, we get connected to the grid. Second thing it does, it decreases the peak power that is required during the grid, and that power that is saved can then be directed to the industrial sector. I hope the first point is clear. I hope the first point is clear. Now see, so this will lead to offsetting of the peak load. Next, net metering benefit will also be there. What is this net metering benefit? So, thank you, Shivani. So, the net metering benefit, net metering, it means how much have you consumed and how much have you generated. The net will be calculated as your bill. And this is a very, very important point. Why? Because electricity non-payment dues are a very big problem in the electricity sector. Electricity non-payment of dues is a very, very big problem, and if there is net metering, we are incentivizing the households and the other entities to come up with, get connected to the grid, the power supply grid, and get formalized. So the government will also have certain data. I hope this is clear, guys. Let's clear? No problem. Let's move on. Now see, let's try to understand the next question. Consider the following statements regarding the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. First, it is applicable to all BPL households only. Now see, this is a wrong statement. Why? Because not only BPL households, there are other criteria, which means you need to have electricity supply, you need to have a household. So it is not only applicable to BPL households. This was deliberately made an extreme statement so that you understand the concept. Now see, it will result in increased cost for government. No, it will result in decreased cost, peak load will reduce, net metering will also ensure more payments. Expenses will be shared by center and states. No, because expenses will be shared by center and PSUs plus customers. So all options are wrong, just like your love life. Next, move on. Now, next is India's unemployment rate in 2023 drops to 3.1%. Now see, this unemployment rate, okay, this unemployment rate is a very recurring theme across the year, because some or the other data keeps on coming. So let us spend some time about the various aspects that get related under this unemployment rate. Now, you don't need to know what is this exact rate, because this keeps on varying. Sometimes it will be 3.1, sometimes it will be 4. You don't need to worry about those, but you do need to know a general trend. Let's try to understand. This is unemployment rate, guys. This is unemployment rate. Unemployment rate, this is. Sure. Let's start. So India's unemployment rate has recently dropped to 3.1%. That is not relevant, but what is relevant is this periodic labor force survey. Periodic labor force survey. So let's first try to understand few concepts. One concept that you will be coming across is labor force participation rate. Another thing that you will be coming across is worker participation rate. Another thing that you will come across is something called as employment rate, and another thing is unemployment rate. Let's try to understand what all these are, and then we will go into what is PLFS, periodic labor force survey, and then we will delve into other aspects. First, let's try to understand what do these metrics even stand for. Very clear or very good. Now see, so let's try to understand what all these terms stand for. So for example, there is a total population of the country. What is the total population of the country? Around 140 crore people. Amongst this total population of the country, some people will be in the labor force. Now what do we call as labor force? We call working age population as labor force, which means more than 15 plus years. And what is the working age population in India? It is around 52 crores in 2022 according to the World Bank. According to the World Bank. Now, of these working age population, some people will be seeking work and they will get employed, and some people will be seeking work but they will not get employed, and some people will be preparing for IAS. Where does that come? Preparing for IAS. Why? Because you are not seeking work. बेरोजगार तो बैठे हो, but you are not seeking work. You are a part of labor force, but you are not, neither you are seeking employment, so neither you will be counted, you will not be counted in this aspect. Now see, now let's try to understand what is labor force participation rate. Labor force participation rate means of the labor force, how many people are willing to work. Either they are employed or unemployed. How many of them are willing to work? This C plus D tells us how many people are willing to work. And labor force participation rate talks about C plus D divided by A, total population of the country. Okay, so that excludes you guys. That excludes you guys. Remember, labor force participation rate excludes you guys. Who are you guys? Not willing to work and not searching for work. Okay, not searching for anything, looking for something in any case. So that is what is labor force participation rate. Now what is worker participation rate? Worker participation rate tells us level of employment. It talks about a certain level of employment. Now what is that employment? How many people are employed, labor seeking work, and are employed of the total population? C by A. C by A. Then what is this? Employment rate. Employment rate means of how much labor force is there, how many are working and seeking to work. You need to understand that WPR and employment rate both tell us the level of employment. Worker participation rate and employment rate both tell us the employment scenario in the nation, but both have a different denominator. One denominator in under worker population rate, the denominator is total population. So of the total population, how many are willing to work and are employed will be told by worker population rate. But of the total labor force, how many are employed will be told by employment rate. Next is unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is nothing but the people that are unemployed, which is D, divided by the total labor force. I hope this is clear. Preparing for IAS comes under labor force, but you are not seeking work. So you will not be calculated under labor force participation rate, guys. Where will underemployed people come? रुक जाओ भाई, बता रहे हैं. What does A denote? A for Abhishek. अरे भाई, A is just some variable. WPRC. Now, so let's move on to the other aspects. Now, what is this PLFS? Now, try to understand why was the PLFS? Why was the PLFS even brought? Now, PLFS was brought by NSO in 2017. PLFS was brought by NSO in 2017. Now, what was this PLFS? Periodic Labor Force Survey. Now, what was happening was we were experiencing some problems. One of the problems were change color. गिरगिट समझ रखा है. Now, one of the problems that we were experiencing was delayed data, because initially this employment unemployment survey of NSSO was being done every 5 years. By 5 years, the structure of the employment also changes. Then, at the same time, what this resulted was in inaccurate data. At the same time, not capturing current employment structure. Now, what was this current employment structure that NSO, National Statistical Office, was not able to capture, Himlata? What was this? Not able to capture the employment structure. Now, see, how do we measure employment? How do we measure employment? Employment is measured in usually three ways. Employment is measured usually in three ways. Now, what are those three ways? One is something called as usual principal approach. Usual principal approach. Then is usual principal and subsidiary approach. And the other is current weekly status approach. Now, what is this current weekly status? Within the last week, have you been employed even for 1 hour? So, for example, if a Zomato delivery guy has been employed for even 1 hour in the last week, he will be considered as employed. What is usual principal and subsidiary approach? It talks about whether in the last 365 days, have you been employed for more than 183 days, which is 6 months. If you have been either if you have been employed for more than 6 months, or last 30 days you have had some employment. As long as you have been employed for major part of the last year, and you have been employed in one day of the last 30 days, you will be considered as employed. And what is principal approach? It means that whether you have been employed for more than 183 days in the last year. Which means, now see, if under usual principal approach, if you have not been employed, it means employment problem is very, very chronic. It means employment problem is very, very chronic. Why? Because you have not been employed in the last year. Then usual principal and subsidiary approach tells us that there has been some kind of employment. But all these approach, and even currently, all these approach have some problem. All these approach have some problem. Now, what is the problem that we are facing? What is the problem that we are facing? See, whether you have been employed or not, we can get to know through these three modules or these three approaches, but we cannot know about seasonal employment. What is seasonal employment? Like in agriculture, in certain seasons you will be employed, but in certain seasons you will not be employed. At the same time, this current approach also does not tell us about disguised employment or underemployment. Underemployment means it will tell us whether you have been employed or not, but whether you are working to your full capacity, whether you are getting remunerated to your full capacity, that will not be told under these approaches. It will only tell us whether you have been employed or whether you have not been employed. So, for example, an illiterate person doing Swiggy delivery is employed, but a PhD holder doing Swiggy delivery is underemployed because that PhD holder is not working to their full potential. And that is what we call as underemployment. But that will again not be captured even under PLFS. I hope these three approaches are clear, guys. I hope these three approaches are clear, guys, and these problems have been there persistently. Yes, Saurabh. Yes, Shivani, higher education, higher employment equal to higher chances of IS preparation. Now, underemployment means the labor is not getting employed to their full potential. Labor is not getting employed to their full potential. Got it till here? Now, what does the PLFS do? What does the PLFS do? Dheeraj, you can simply log on to the Labor Bureau. You can simply log on to the Labor Bureau and you can get all these details. NSO की website पे मिल जाएगा. Log on to the NSO website. Download the PLFS for this year. They give all these details. Now let's try to understand what is PLFS trying to do. Now PLFS conducts two types of surveys, which means what is a quarterly survey? What is there in a quarter? Not what you thinking. Quarter means 3 months. So every 3 months, PLFS will be in the news, and once a year, PLFS will be in the news. PLFS will be in the news. Now, under the urban areas and under the quarterly, we are more worried about the urban areas. And how are we checking it? Current weekly status. Why current weekly status? Because of the gig economy and short-term prospects, these kind of jobs are getting created more. And the usual principal approach or principal and subsidiary approach will not be very common. Why? Because these types of jobs will give us whether you are getting a full-time job. Current weekly status will give us an idea whether you have any job in the past 7 days. Plus full form. What is plus? Where have I written plus? PLFS, Periodic Labor Force Survey. Now see, and then we have annual survey. Annual survey is the one that has come recently. In that, we will be taking it urban areas as well as rural areas under two approaches, current weekly status as well as usual status approach. This is nothing but principal plus subsidiary approach, this one. So we are taking this approach and we are taking this approach to calculate employment under PLFS, which is why all throughout the year PLFS will be in the news. Got it? In fact, after 3 months, it will again come in the news. And again, it is the same concepts that you need to know. You don't need to worry about the percentages, but you do need to worry about the trend. Now let's try and focus on the current trend. Now parameters measured. Parameters measured. No, Ramavat. As of now, we don't have any metric to calculate that. We know what they are, but we don't have any metric to calculate that. Now see, under PLFS, what are the three ratios that are measured? Labor force participation rate, worker population rate, and unemployment rate, which is not measured. Employment rate is not measured. Okay. So employment rate is not measured. This can be an important prelims question. What is this employment rate? This is not measured under periodic labor force survey, which is conducted by NSO. So this is one prelims question. Now, this is conducted for overall country. as well as it is also conducted based on the gender and based on the region. We calculate labor force participation rate, worker population rate, unemployment rate for urban areas. We calculate these three parameters for males. We calculate these three parameters for females. We calculate these three parameters for rural areas every year under the annual survey. I hope this is clear. Now, for 2023 to 2024, what you need to know is there has been, just remember this word, consistent improvement. There has been consistent improvement since pandemic. There has been consistent improvement since pandemic. What do we mean? It means that in urban areas, labor force participation rate has increased, worker population rate has increased, unemployment rate has decreased. Rural areas, all these three rates have improved. For males, all these three rates have improved. For females, all these three rates have improved. This year's annual survey is very, very good. Why? Because all the parameters are showing improvement. You don't need to know which is which specific parameter. So, for example, initially, urban areas used to show higher, used to show some poor record, but this year, all the parameters are showing high. Now see, often one point will always be asked between PLFS, and this will always be compared by CMIE. CMI is done by private entity, obviously, and PLFS is done by NSO, which is a government entity. Now, there have been many conflicts. Whenever you have to criticize the government, which data will you use? CMIE. Whenever you have to support the government, you will use PLFS, which is the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. CMIE data. CMIE full form. Now, which data will you use? PLFS. Why? Irrespective of whatever you feel, अपने दिल से आप बोल दीजिए, this is all politics. But you are aiming for Indian civil services. You are aiming to become a government servant. So you can call it all of this as politics. That does not matter. Fact of the matter is you need to refer PLFS survey. But just to understand what is happening in the normal discourse, whenever the government will have to be criticized, they will refer CMIE data, and whenever the government has to be supported, the people will refer PLFS data. Now, if it comes to which is the better data, see, even in the sample size, CMI covers hardly 10K households, but PLFS covers 100K households. So PLFS data is more broad. But again, if you have to criticize, you can criticize anything. People can criticize you just for sitting on your bed, watching some screen. Don't go watch this screen. Watch this screen. Now, let's come back. So this is what is the deal. Now, talking about something called as natural rate of unemployment. Now, see, what is this natural unemployment rate? Natural unemployment rate means that some amount of unemployment is good for the economy. Are they saying that? Some amount of unemployment is good for the economy. Daag achhe hain. Now, why are these daag achhe? Why is unemployment good? Because we heard that unemployment should be zero. Everybody should have jobs. But the economists say that the unemployment, there has to be certain unemployment in the economy, which means few people should always prepare for IAS. बेरोजगारी रहनी चाहिए. Why should there be unemployment in the economy? See, because if everybody is employed, worker wages will go up and input cost will rise. So, for example, if everybody is employed, let's talk about services sector. You can extrapolate that example to other sectors. Amazon, Microsoft, TCS. Everybody is employed. in the society, 100% employment. If Amazon wants to increase its production, which means if Amazon wants to have growth, it will need more labor. But to get more labor, where will that labor come from? Where will that labor come from? Everybody is employed. So Amazon will poach someone from Microsoft, and that poaching will happen at a higher wages. Input cost will increase for Amazon, output cost will increase for Amazon. Similarly, now Microsoft also needs to get some replacement. That replacement also has a job, so he will also come at higher wages, which is why it is said that if there was a pool of unemployed people, Amazon, instead of poaching, could have gone for that unemployed pool, and wages would have remained at a certain level, which would not have resulted in the price wage spiral, because input cost will increase, wages will increase, output cost will also increase, and that will start happening all over the country. That is what is the problem of 100% employment, or if there is no unemployment. Got it clear, guys? I hope this point is clear, guys. मिडिवल टाइम की तरह टेरिटरीज कैप्चर करना चाहिए, बिल्कुल सही बात है। कोई आईएएस के प्रिपरेशन भी नहीं होती, कोई दिक्कत भी नहीं होती, आराम से एकदम फूल पत्तियों में रहते सब लोग। वेरी गुड, लेट्स मूव ऑन। देख लिया। Now let's try to understand few questions. With reference to the usual status approach to measuring unemployment in India, let's try to understand this. This approach to measuring employment uses 7 days preceding to the date of survey as the reference period. This is nothing but current weekly status. But it also uses principal and subsidiary status. But yes, for urban areas, it uses current weekly status. I hope you remember that. For urban areas, it uses only current weekly status, but for urban and rural areas, it uses both current weekly status as well as usual status approach. So the first is, right, it fails to capture, wait. So if we have to look at the complete statement, this approach is used for measuring, uses 7 days preceding the date of survey as the reference period. If we look at it closely, it is not mentioning specifically about urban areas, and that too for quarterly. So this statement has to be considered as wrong because it uses both the types of approaches. Now see, yes, usual status approach. Usual status approach talks about 365 days and the 30 days. Usual status approach talks about 365 days and 30 days. It fails to capture short-term fluctuations in unemployment due to seasonality. Yes. Why? Because it will give us total about 365 days. So if there is a migrant labor, if it has been employed for 183 days and it has been unemployed for the remaining year, that will not get captured. So the second statement is correct. Not correct, A for Ahmedabad. Correct, Ravi. Thank you so much. I will do something about these answers. Which of the following provide official sources of unemployment? All the three provide, guys. 1, 2, 3. Let's move on to the next topic. India to be a part of Bloomberg EM bond index. Now see, there are few things you need to understand. Guys, is everything clear till here, guys? Just give me a heads up or just let me know so that we can move forward to the next topic. Lakshmi, mains question is already there. First topic and the last topic. Don't worry. Fair enough, guys. Let's move on. Yes, Saurabh. Any 30 days last year, any of the days in the last 30 days, that will also be included. Now, after JP Morgan, Bloomberg to also include Indian bonds in EM index. And that is what has happened in the recent times. And since it will happen till 2025, which means right from September 2023, it will keep on happening till January 2025, which makes it relevant till May 2025, where you will have prelims. So this topic is relevant for next 2 years minimum. Okay, this topic is relevant for next 2 years minimum. Voice is not clear. Guys, is the voice clear? I will tell you what is the EM index and everything. Don't worry. Is the voice clear, guys? Fair enough. Thank you so much, guys. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, let's try to understand few concepts before we get into the details. The first thing we need to understand, what are these FAR bonds? Fully, what is the full form? Fully accessible route bonds. Now, what are these fully accessible route bonds? Now, see, if you would remember, since 1991, we had LPG reforms, which means we allowed foreign investment in India. We allowed foreign investment in India. No, this is not direct relation to full convertibility and half convertibility. Let's try to understand Femina. So we had foreign investment. We were promoting foreign investment in India. And then in 2003, we also enacted something called as FRBM Act. What is this FRBM Act? Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. Now, under this, there were certain restrictions posed on the government to maintain fiscal deficit, revenue deficit, and all these targets. Now, what has happened in 2020? In 2020, what happened? COVID pandemic struck. Now, with this COVID pandemic, what happened? That we were in need of investments, and so far government was not much inclined for foreign investments in its borrowing program, because we did not want the foreigners to owe our bonds or our government's borrowings much. So we had allowed the foreign investments, but the foreign investments were largely limited to the equity side. We did not allow them in the debt side. That is essentially borrowing side. So in 2020, what happens? RBI comes up with new regulations. Why RBI comes up with new regulations, guys, for government borrowing? Why RBI comes up with new regulations for government borrowing? Because RBI, not bank of the government, RBI is the public debt manager. RBI is the public debt manager. So RBI is the public debt manager. That is why new regulations were brought by RBI, and RBI introduced this new category of bonds. I hope you understand. How do you get the money? By releasing bonds. How do you get the money? By releasing bonds. Now, in that context, let's try to understand what are these FAR bonds. Now, these are debt instruments that allow foreign investors to invest in specified Government of India dated securities. What this means? SDLs are not allowed. What are SDLs? State development loans. What are SDLs? State development loans. Cash management bills, not allowed. Treasury bills, not allowed. Dated government security is for more than certain duration. Now, in that context, let's try to understand what are the other things. Now, currently, of all the borrowing that Government of India does, around 35% is under FAR category. So, and we also want to now improve our foreign holdings of our Indian government bonds. One question should come to your mind is why? Why does the government want foreign entities to own its bonds now? What has changed recently? We will come to that question in some time. Okay, we will come to that question in some time, that what has changed recently. But before that, let's look into the few questions. Now, these bonds were introduced again for the foreign investment to come in the government bonds. FAR bonds, please remember, FAR bonds talk about government. They do not talk about private sector. FAR bonds talk about government. FAR bonds do not talk about private sector. I hope this is clear till here, guys. If this is clear, we will move on to the next. What are the indexed bonds? Chalo. Let's move on. What are the indexed bonds? Now, index funds. What are these index funds? So you must have heard something about Nifty 50. What is Nifty 50? Nifty 50 is just a list of all the companies. Nifty 50 is just a list of all the companies that are the top 50 companies in India. Similarly, BSE Sensex. What is this BSE Sensex? BSE Sensex is top 30 companies of India. Okay, top 30 companies of India. So this is an index. Now, there can be two styles of investing. One can be active investing. One can be where you are actively looking which company to invest, where to invest. Other style of investing can be passive style of investing. ये मेरे को फर्क नहीं पड़ता. I do not care what is happening in the market. I will invest in my money. I will invest my money in certain strategy. I will invest my money in top 50 companies of India, and I will forget about that money. If top 50 countries will keep on increasing, my money will also keep on increasing. Now try to understand which companies there in top 50 can change, but there will always be a top 50 company. So my money will always go in the top 50 company, whether that particular company is in Nifty 50 or outside that Nifty 50. And that Nifty 50 becomes an index. And this style of investing is also called as index investing. And this is a passive style of investing where you are not actively looking for certain companies or certain geographies. If something is there in the index, you simply put your money in all that index is saying. I hope this is clear till here, guys. I hope this is clear till here. So even the mutual funds can be of two types: active mutual funds and passive mutual funds. Active mutual funds which actively look for companies to invest. Passive mutual funds are those mutual funds which will directly invest in Nifty 50. For example, Axis Bank Nifty 50 index. It will simply invest in Nifty 50 companies. I hope this is clear, guys. So it is a form of passive investing which revolves around purchasing and holding a representative benchmark. And it is this benchmark that we are talking about, EM index. What is EM index? Emerging Market Index. What is this EM index? Emerging Market Index. See, globally, there are three major indices. One was JP Morgan. Other was Bloomberg Barclays. And the third is FTSE. So these are the three. Of these, two have already been done. Third is remaining, which means in a few months, this topic is again going to become current affairs. Now, what does this mean? Now, in 2013, what did we start? We started discussing the inclusion of government securities in the foreign investment portfolio. And finally, in 2020, we introduced a separate category. September 2021, we got included into JP Morgan's Emerging Market Bond Index. Now, what does this mean? Anybody investing in that index, automatically money will be allocated to India. Anybody investing in that index, automatically money will be allocated to India. I hope this is clear. And in 2024, March, in fact, few days back only, we got included in the Bloomberg Emerging Market Bond Index, which means anybody investing in this Bloomberg index, automatically some money will get allocated to India. Now, do not get confused between the 10% market cap, what is the market cap, China, South Korea, etc. All that information is not relevant for us. The information that is relevant, I've already made the question. Now, Do remember that we are not getting included in multiple indices. We are only getting included in certain indices. What is the index that we want to get included in? Global aggregate and related indices. This is another index. India is not included in this, and this is why it is a very, very important statement. What they will do is, they also know that you will not remember the index name. They also know that you will not remember the index name, and they will give you any random index, and there it will strike you, yes, 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 I studied something like this. But please remember, you don't need to remember all the global indices. But in the financial markets, okay, in the financial markets, what is the next thing that we are looking to get involved into? We want to get included in India in the global aggregate related index, because that will bring in the huge money. That will bring in the huge money. Got it clear, guys? Now see. Next, what does it mean for India? Now see, if foreign money is coming to India, what all will it lead to? If foreign money is investing for government bonds, what does it mean? That government will get cheap credit or cheap borrowing from market, because now not only domestic investors would want to give money to the government, but also the foreign investors would want to give money to the government. Then second point, so fiscal deficit will be easily met. Fiscal deficit targets will be easily met. At the same time, what will this lead to, guys? Tell me, what will this lead to? What will happen to yields on government securities? Will they increase or will they decrease? Will they increase or will they decrease? If more money is flowing into the government, will they increase or will they decrease? By the way, I hope you know the concept that bond yields are inversely proportional to bond price. I hope you know that. If you don't, we will try to cover this in some lecture later. But as of now, just know that bond yield is inversely proportional to bond price. Now try to understand, if the demand of bond of government securities is increasing, if the demand is increasing, bond price will increase. If bond price will increase, bond yield will decrease. Got it? So yields on government securities will decrease, it will not increase. Got it clear, guys? Chalo. Next, now another thing that will happen is, few since we will get more dollar inflow, we will also be in a better position to manage our current account deficit, which is usually around 1% of GDP. And the other is rupee stability, at least in the and there will be appreciation in the short term. By rupee stability, we will have more dollars to stabilize our money. But since more dollar inflow is coming, always remember, if more dollar inflow is coming, this is external and this is India. India में which currency will work? Rupee. And Bahar, they can have dollar or pound sterling. So essentially what will happen, to cross from external market to India's internal market, they need to exchange the dollar or pound for rupee. So essentially what they are saying is, take my dollar, give me your rupee. So demand for rupee will increase, which will lead to appreciation in the short term. Got it clear, guys? I hope this part is clear. Please let me know if there is any other doubt in this. Chalo. Next thing that should come to your mind is, why has been there sudden inclusion? JP Morgan also wants to include us. Bloomberg is including us. FTSE will also include us in coming few months. So why are all these global indices including us? The reason are twofold. First of all, we only had stopped them. They wanted to. We only stopped them, and we have opened up only in 2020 when we came up with FAR route. At the same time, good performance of rupee. Now, this is very important because last time there was a global crisis in 2008. By 2013, rupee has depreciated by 56%. But this time, when the crisis hit in 2020, by 2022 and even 2024, rupee has depreciated hardly by 12%, which shows heavy control of the which shows heavy confidence of the investors in rupee. And that is why recently it has started to show good performance. I hope this point is also clear. In that context, let's try to understand the questions. Now, statement 1. Consider the following statements regarding India's recent inclusion in global bond indices. It will help government access cheaper borrowing to meet its fiscal deficit targets. This is right statement. Then it will have no impact whatsoever on India's private sector as FAR is government security only. Chisti, I will do that from next line. Okay? I will do that from the next class. I will learn all those technicalities. Okay? Keenly at the correct. Okay, this lecture will take hardly 10-15 minutes more, guys. Now, it will have no impact whatsoever. Now, try to understand this makes this statement wrong. Even though FAR is for government security, now see the banks in India need to have certain proportion of their lending in government securities. Around 23% they need to have in government securities, but the banks hold around 30 to 35%. Now, since government's need are getting met from the external sources, banks will have some excess credit which they need not give to the government, which they can give to the private sector, which can lead to more liquidity for the private sector and cheaper credit. Supply will increase, value of the money will go down. So the private sector will also be able to access cheaper credit, but in due course of time. Eventually, it will happen, not in the short term, which makes the second statement wrong. Bond yields are expected to rise. No, bond yields are expected to decrease. So, A for Ahmedabad. Last topic, guys. This has happened yesterday only. India and FTA deal. Let's try to understand this deal. Now, what is EFTA? What is EFTA? You need to remember EFTA is a European Free Trade Association. What all countries are there? Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Switzerland, we already know. Switzerland, Yashraj movies, and chocolates. Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is the only second doubly landlocked country in the world. There are two doubly landlocked countries in the world, Uzbekistan and Liechtenstein. Doubly landlocked. Doubly landlocked means to reach to a sea, that country needs to reach to an ocean, that country needs to pass through minimum two countries. For example, Nepal is landlocked, but through India it can reach the ocean. But Uzbekistan is doubly landlocked. To reach the ocean, it needs to cross through minimum two countries. That is why they are doubly landlocked. And in the world, there are only two countries that are doubly landlocked. One is Liechtenstein, other is Uzbekistan. Please remember the members of FTA because that can be a probable question. So first, how will we remember? Swiss chocolates, doubly landlocked countries. Iceland. Always compare Iceland with Greenland. Greenland, there is no greenery, there is only ice. Iceland, there is no ice, there is only greenery. That is how you will remember Iceland. And Norway is a very interesting country because it says it has submitted itself as a neutral member. It has submitted itself as a neutral member in UN, but it is now planning to join NATO after Finland. Got it, Taylor? This is how you can learn these four members. Rest, you create whichever story you want to. Fact of the matter is that you need to learn these names. So these are the four names that are relevant, that are part of EFTA. Okay. Now, as you would have already read by now, these are not the part of European Union. Okay, these are not the part of European Union. Now, let's see what is the current status between India and FTA or EFTA. Now, this current status between India and EFTA, so we have around 19 billion bilateral trade, but we export only 2 billion. Majorly, we are importers. 17 billion exports come. 17 billion exports come from EFTA countries to India. And of these 17 billion exports, 18% is 80% is gold. Okay, of these 80% is gold. Got it clear? Then see. Another thing that can be asked is India is the fifth largest trading partner. This can be a direct statement, guys. All these statements can be a direct statement in prelims. So India is the fifth largest. It will tell you, it will try to confuse you between first, second, third. Just know that India is the fifth largest economy, fifth largest trading partner. Learn whichever way you like. Fifth largest economy, fifth largest trading partner. Learn whichever way you like, but some facts you need to learn. We cannot just wish away certain facts. Now see, next, Switzerland is the largest partner of India in EFTA. This is also very, very important. That is why I mentioned Swiss chocolates and Swiss watches. Then, even though we are exporting only 2 billion and we are importing 17 billion, this is a very, very important point that with Norway, we have a trade surplus. So, if the statement comes that India has a trade deficit with all EFTA countries, is that right or wrong? That is a wrong statement. If it comes that India has trade deficit with all EFTA countries, is that a right statement or a wrong statement? Wrong statement. Why? Because with Norway we have a trade surplus. Then let's see. Now, what all are the benefits of India becoming a member of this, or India becomes signing this agreement? What all are the benefits of India signing this agreement? See, first of all, India will provide duty concessions on certain PLIS sectors. Now, what is this PLIS? If you would remember, PLIS, Production Linked Incentive Scheme, was launched under Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it covers around 20 to 25 sectors. It covers around 20 to 25 sectors of economy. So we are giving benefits even in those. If you would remember what we talked about in GATS, India wants more trade in services, and that too mode for services. We want more mode 4. But the others want in other types, other mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, and in goods. Others want in goods plus mode 1, mode 2, and mode 3. So we have given it some concessions again, but agricultural sector has been excluded. Agricultural sector has been excluded. However, food processing sector has been included. So this is a very important part. Agricultural sector, dairy sector and all, since we have a huge component of unorganized sector and 50% of labor is dependent on agriculture, that is why we have not included freer trade in agricultural sector. Then A very important point which most of the news portals have also missed out is the mutual recognition of professional services like nursing, CA, architect. So initially what used to happen that if an engineer or if these people used to go from India to other countries, they had to undertake another certification. But now Indian certifications will also be applicable in these EFTA countries. So you can do certain nursing courses, certain specified courses from India, and they will again, you don't need to do any other certification in these EFTA countries. So this is a very important point which most of the people have missed out. Next, no major tariff reduction for goods by Europe side. At the same time, the most important point of this deal is that for the first time, India has received a binding commitment of $100 billion of investment and 1 million direct jobs in the next 15 years. This is a very, very important point. Okay, this is a very, very important point, and this is a legally binding commitment. Legally binding commitment. What this means is that if the EFTA countries do not hold this agreement, if the EFTA countries do not undertake this $100 billion of investment in the next 15 years, India can increase import tariffs. I hope it is clear till here, guys. Is there any doubt? Tariff means, understand it as a tax, guys. Understand it as a tax, Hemlata, that we put on imported goods, duties, tariffs, etc. Fair enough, guys. Barrier, yeah, tax barrier. Let's try to understand another question in this context. So, regarding the recent India EFTA trade deal, it commits governments of EFTA to invest $100 billion in the next 15 years. Is this a statement right or wrong, guys? Is this a statement right or wrong? So, this statement is wrong because it commits private sector. Because it commits private sector. Government will not invest. Okay, government will not invest. Next, it it excludes the items including agriculture, gold, and food processing. Gold is excluded, agriculture is excluded, but food processing is included, which means lesser tariffs. So on gold and agricultural products, we will not be decreasing the tariffs, but for the others, we will be decreasing the tariffs. So even this is wrong. India has a trade deficit with all the FTA members. This is also wrong because we know with Norway, we do have a trade surplus. So all choices are wrong. Please do attempt this question. What are the salient features of the recent India-FTA trade deal? This brings us to the end of today's class. I hope you remember that the previous webinar that we missed will be conducted on not next, but on Friday. Friday 8:30 p.m. guys, we will meet again. If that's all, if any doubt, we can wait. Otherwise, let's call it a day, guys. Let's call it a night. All right, guys. Thank you so much, guys. So we'll call it a night. Have a good night, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Akash. Thank you, Shivani. Thank you, Ramavat. Thank you so much, guys.